Hello, I'm Joan Landis, and today we're talking about the role of trauma in increasing the distress that people normally have in their day-to-day lives. Okay, what's trauma? Trauma is a concept in psychology that has been around for a long time, but it doesn't get too much press. Where most people in the world hear about trauma is post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, and so that's definitely a manifestation of a trauma disorder. But what is trauma? Trauma is basically any event that happens in your life where you feel a sense of being disempowered, so you feel helpless in front of it, and that you feel like your safety or your bodily integrity is at risk, and that you don't, and that you feel alone in it. And so those types of things seem to indicate to your mind that this is a really, really horrible situation, and it's kind of stored in a different part of your brain than the normal memories, like what did I have for breakfast 4 days ago, what's on my shopping list. Those are stored in parts of your mind that let it just be easily degraded and disappear over time. But trauma seems to stay really fresh in our minds and has a really strong emotional impact, so that it's recorded in parts of your brain that keep it right there, fresh and memorable. Because think about it, it seemed like a life and death scenario to your mind. And so of course your brain is going to record that and keep that on file, so that if anything else looks like that you can react in a very big, hypervigilant way and save yourself from this potential doom. So trauma events are stored in a different part of your brain where they can be called forth at a second's notice. A little trigger can bring it back. And so the problem with that is that it also creates other effects. And some of the effects are that you can freeze, that you can want to run, that you can want to fight. And really, the triggers around you are quite minor. But once that memory, that survival memory is triggered, then your body just seems to act on its own. And not only does it act on its own, it acts on its own in a big, dramatic way. So one of the ways that I explain trauma to my clients is that it's like we are all a boiling pot on a stove, right? And it's boiling, And in therapy, what we do is we take the lid off the boiling pot, and that helps it calm down a little bit so it's not going to boil over. And then we look and say, what's in that boiling pot? What is in there? Maybe we need to take some stuff out, maybe we need to get rid of some things, and we unpack some of the problems from our past in that boiling pot. Well, people that have been through trauma, it's like they've got that boiling pot, but the heat is turned up on high. And that pot is boiling more than anybody else around them, and it's overflowing, and it's exploding, and it's just being really hugely dramatic in the effects that trauma can have on people. And so we have to have a lot of compassion on ourselves and other people who have experienced trauma. So let's talk about possible examples of trauma. Well, one of the other interesting things about trauma is that trauma is very personal and it's very relative. What traumatizes one person may not traumatize the next person. And so we don't compare traumas or measure trauma as far as, that should traumatize everybody. No, for different people, different things will trigger trauma. And so some examples of trauma could be as simple as being in a car accident, could be very traumatizing. Having your parents divorce could be very traumatizing. Failing in school could be very traumatizing. Wetting your pants, right, or soiling your pants as a kid, super traumatizing. You will remember that your whole life, right? Humiliation can be traumatizing. And even though you aren't actually at risk of bodily harm or survival, there's a part of the emotional part of you that feels like it is at risk of not surviving, that humiliation, that vulnerability. And so seeing someone abused in your parents' home, if you saw your parents fighting or abusing each other, being sexually abused, of course, is almost always traumatizing. And so trauma can come in many, many different forms. Even having your favorite pet die can be very traumatic for a child. Maybe seeing your grandma die, just something like that can leave an indelible memory that really made an impact on you and stays really fresh. One of the ways we know something is traumatic is that when it comes to it's conscious, it can be just like, almost like you're reliving it. You can remember details, you can remember smells, you can remember how your body felt, you can remember sights. That's part of the qualities of a traumatic memory or a traumatic re-experiencing. Another thing that traumatic memories are really bad at, they're bad at being able to sense chronological time the way that we do. And so traumatic memory, a second may feel like it lasted a year, or a year may feel like it lasted a second. And that's typical for traumatic memories. Also, a lot of traumatic memories are just speechless horror, that you don't have the words in the moment to cry out for help, or to stop it, or to address the perpetrator. And so those are some of the qualities of traumatic memories. And what happens is that when we submerge those traumatic memories, kind of like an iceberg in the ocean, we might remember parts of it, but the great impact of it, the great emotional impact of it, is beneath our consciousness. And so we might carry that with us for years and years, not understanding sometimes our reactions to things that seem out of line with what the trigger was. And so one of the things I'd like my clients to do is gently think about things in their past, memories that maybe they've kind of brushed under the rug. And just think about, gosh, what were some things that were hard for me in my past? Now, when we think about it, many traumatic memories occur in childhood. And there's kind of some reasons for that. Adults a lot of times can handle things better than children because they can think abstractly. They realize there's context, that it doesn't happen to everybody in the world. It was just me at this time, that I really wasn't going to actually die, that there really are people around to help me and love me. I'm not alone in this. And so a lot of times adults can go through hard things and not have the lasting traumatic effects that children can. I know there's this kind of idea that children are resilient, they can, deal with anything. Well, that really is not true. Children are very, very good at, repressing things and making it so that they can survive and not have to face the overwhelming triggers to them. They're good at repressing, but they really are not that resilient. Children are very vulnerable. And one of the reasons, there's a lot of reasons for that vulnerability. First of all, is their size and strength. Their total dependence on adults around them for their very survival. I know here where I live, there was a 5-year-old child that was lost in the mountains. The parents were camping, and by the next morning that child was absolutely dead. And the weather was not that outrageous, but children are absolutely dependent on adults. They know that vulnerability, and so that just even smaller things can traumatize them. Things become so big to children. Do you ever remember going back to a house you grew up in? You thought everything was so big and you're like, wow, those rooms are actually kind of small. And the same is true for children. The scary things are much scarier, and the risks and the vulnerability is greater. And that is part of being a child. And so children are very vulnerable to being traumatized. We have to protect them. We have to keep them safe. If they have been through some trauma, we need to surround them with love, support, allow them to talk about it if they're ready, not force them, and be very accepting of their experience. Don't diminish it, don't degrade it, and allow them to feel their authentic feelings. So with trauma, I like to just explain to my clients that if you have been through some traumatic experiences, it may be like that iceberg that's underneath. It's like that boiling pot that's had the heat turned up. You don't really realize what it is that's driving you to have these super powerful feelings in the moment. But I'm telling you, it's probably trauma. And when I deal with clients with a trauma past, it always takes longer in therapy to heal that trauma. And so you just have to be patient and compassionate to yourself. If you have a trauma past, you probably will react in bigger ways to things, and you're not crazy, you're not evil, you're not weak. You've been traumatized. And your brain becomes very hypervigilant to trauma and to other events as a way to protect itself from being traumatized in the future. So that hypervigilance is very normal. It's a normal coping mechanism to trauma. Now it makes problems, right? That hypervigilance makes problems because, a backfire in a car really is not a grenade on the battlefield. You don't have to hit the deck. But just to understand that that's what's going on if you have some trauma in your past. So be patient with yourself if you have trauma. I would like you, if you feel like you have some trauma in your past, to get a journal and start journaling about it, start remembering things about it, and then making sure that you have a sympathetic person to talk it through with you, to offer support. Do some mindfulness exercises, some breathing exercises, take yourself to your peaceful place, and just be very patient with yourself as you have these big reactions, realizing that the trauma it was real, and your brain is not going to let go of that, because to your brain, it's a matter of survival, never to forget it. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Start writing in your journal. If you have trauma, start talking to people who are supportive. Get in a group that has been through survivors of the same thing. And just knowing that you're not alone in it and normalizing it a little bit, especially the reactions, is very, very helpful. So I hope this has been good for you, and if you or someone in your life has been traumatized, have more compassion for yourself and expect those big reactions, but there are things that we can do, and we're going to learn more. So thanks. See you later. Bye-bye.